what we're going to do is we're going to see this individual, this man who's been on a mat for 38 years. And Jesus asked him a very unusual question. Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be healed?" Or as we're talking about this morning, do you want to get unstuck? Let me ask you, church, have you ever been stuck? Now, growing up in the main streets of Jasper, Alabama, there are a lot of places out in the woods to get stuck. You didn't even have to go out in the woods. You could be out in your front yard after a rainstorm and get stuck. You ever been stuck? Maybe we're not talking about stuck in the mud or stuck in sand, but I'm talking about for just a moment, stuck in life. Maybe because of some physical problem or relationship problem or addiction or loss of a loved one. Maybe poor financial decisions have gotten you stuck. Or maybe this morning for you, you're stuck because of some emotional wound from your past. Listen, church, I'm going to tell you something before we get too far into this lesson this morning. All of us in this room are capable of getting stuck. Am I right? And the question that Jesus asked this man is the very same question he's going to ask you this morning. So we are going to take a moment here. We're going to have up on the screen a scene from the series called The Chosen that will depict this event from John chapter 5. But the reason I'm showing you this morning is I want you to put yourself into this scene. Whatever it is that's got you stuck to your mat this morning, I want you to envision yourself as that individual in that moment. Can you do that with me? All right, let's try this together.
Shalom.
Me?
Yes.
Shalom.
I have a question for you.
For me. I don't have many answers, but I'm listening.
Do you want to be healed?
Who are you?
We'll get to that later. But my question remains.
Will you take me to the water? Look, I'm having a really bad day.
You've been having a bad day for a long time. So?
Sir, I have no one to help me into the water when it's stirred up. And when I do get close, the others step down in front of me. And so...
Look at me. Look at me. That's not what I asked. I'm not asking you about who's helping you, or who's not helping, or who's getting in your way. I'm asking about you.
I've tried.
For for a long time. I know. And you don't want false hope again, I understand. But this pool, it has nothing for you. It means nothing. And you know it. But you're still here. Why?
I don't know.
You don't need this pool. You only need me. So, do you want to be healed? So let's go. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk.
Now, let me do a little bit of setup for you if you don't understand the scenario. Basically, what you have here in John chapter 5, there are these walls that surround Jerusalem. And there's actually one gate known as the sheep gate. And obviously, that would be the gate where the what go in? The sheep. And next to that gate, there was a pool. And this pool was fed by an artesian spring that occasionally this underground water source would bubble up. The myth or the legend, as you might say, was that this was caused by an angel reaching down and touching the water. And whoever could jump into that water first would be healed. Now, you want to know the evidence? There is, in reality, no evidence that anyone was ever healed at that pool. But folks, when you are desperate for healing in that day, you'd be willing to try anything, wouldn't you? So you had all these number of people gather around every day around this pool. And from this location, we see how Jesus confronts this man where he's at. And the truth is, he's confronting me and you as well when we get stuck. So what I want us to do together this morning is consider some very powerful principles that this moment reveals to us. But before we do that, let's answer this question. What is it that is keeping you pinned to your mat? Now, I know you're tempted right now to think about lunch and to think about the rest of your day and everything you've got going on. But every one of us are carrying around a mat with us today. But a lot of us are pinned to that mat. And the reality is, Jesus comes to this man who's been disabled for 38 years, and he asks him what many might consider to be a fairly insensitive question. Look at it again, verse number 6. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, what, church? Do you want to get well? And on the surface, that doesn't seem to be the kindest thing to say. But what Jesus is saying is, look, you've been here for 38 years. You keep lying around this pool. Nobody ever receives what they're looking for here from this pool. Why do you keep coming back? In other words, if you continue, listen, because this is us, if you continue doing what you've been doing, you will continue to keep getting what you've been getting. Is that not true? So, do you really want to be healed? I was thinking about this statement, and as sensitive as our world is today, I don't believe that this happened in our day, in our time, that people would like Jesus' words very much. In fact, there might be a hashtag mean Jesus on Twitter right now if people witness Jesus say these words to a man who had been lying by this pool, paralyzed from the waist down for 38 years. Because the truth is, our world wants a Jesus who will come and sit down with us on our mat, who will never challenge our thinking, who will never call us to change. But I'm telling you this morning, Jesus wants you to change. He doesn't want you to live your life stuck on a mat somewhere. Again, what keeps us on our mat? Well, the truth is, when you break it down, what's keeping me and you on our mat are the very same things that kept this man on the mat. You say, Jonathan, what is that? Well, do me a favor this morning and let's write these down together. Let's look at the very first thing that keeps us on our mat. And this one ought to be obvious to us, but it's something that's going on right here, right now. And that is, number one, residing with other mat dwellers. Do you notice who's around the pool with this guy? Who is it, church? It's a bunch of people just like him. Check it out, verse 3. Within these lay a large number of the disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed. Now you think about it, this pool isn't providing a steady stream of healing. There's no revolving door going in and out of this pool of people who come and get healed and leave. It's a steady stream of people lying around this pool, hoping beyond hope that somehow this might deliver them. But why are they truly there? Stop and think about it, church. Why are they there? Because the reality is, truth is, nobody wants to be miserable alone, do they? And so what do? Well, I'm going to gather around people that understand me. I'm going to gather around people that are hurting just like me. Sometimes I want to gather around people that are just as miserable as I am, because as the old saying goes, misery loves what? Company. Listen carefully. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but I've seen this my whole life. Here's what we do. We run in packs. In every church I've ever preached, those in our churches who love to gossip, who do they gather around themselves? People who love to gossip. What about on your job site? Are there folks on your job sites that are chronic complainers? Who do they seek out to hang out with? Other naysayers, right? At Waters Road, I want you to know it's very important that you find a group of people that will not just pacify you to see yourself the way you are, but people who will challenge you to move forward. In other words, you've got to be careful who you're actually hanging out with. But folks, we want to hang out with everybody who thinks and does exactly the same way we do. And let me take this a step further. Because our world, they will accept you on your mat just the way you are. Because if they were honest, they would tell you they want you to stay on that mat. The world wants you to stay on that mat. Trust me, that's what they want. They don't want you to ever get up off of your mat. And you know what I've realized in 45 years? There are plenty of miserable folks out there in this world. And they want you to be miserable too. You know who's the most miserable spirit, person, whatever you want to call it, that's ever lived? Satan. And you know what his whole job is? To make you miserable. And to hopefully make you miserable for eternity. So, you think Satan wants you to get up off of your mat? No. You think Satan wants you to get unstuck? No. But Jesus does. He says, I want to change your life. I want to change your surroundings. That's the first reason why there's a lot of us who aren't getting up off of our mat. But the second reason is this. It'll be up on the screen. It's very simple. There's a lot of us who are living with a victim mentality. We seem to be raising, at current day, an entire society of victims. But I think it's very compelling to see how Jesus might respond to a people or a person who lives with a victim mentality. Truth is, he calls them out on it. Look at what he says in verse 5. One man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, do you want to get well? Now, think about it for just a second. Here's a man who's been lying at this pool. He has been in this condition 38 years. And what is Jesus saying? Jesus is asking the question, do you want to get well? What would most of us scream out loud? What would most of us scream out loud? There you go. Jesus, though, is saying, do you want to get well? Because if you want to get well, some things are going to have to change. You see, you can't keep hanging out with the same people that you've always hung out with, the same surroundings that you've grown comfortable with. You may have to change your surroundings. Are you willing and able to take responsibility for what it means to now move forward in your life? Are you ready to be healed? Or are you just going to play the victim game? Is it easy to be a victim? You know why in our culture it's easy for many to play the victim game? Because that's where many in our culture get their identity from. Do you know anybody like that? Anybody they've got an issue in their life and that issue has now become their identity? Do you know anybody like that, church? Did you know the Bible is full of people like that? You go, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. Let me show you. Let me show you that the Bible is full of people that Jesus healed. We don't even know their name, but we know their what? Their issue. Luke chapter 8. You have the woman with the issue of blood. We don't know her name, but we know her issue, don't we? The man who was born blind. We don't know his name, but we know his issue, right? John chapter 8. We see the woman caught in adultery. We don't know her name, but we know her what? Her issue. Mark chapter 1, you have the leper. Mark chapter 5, you have the Gerasene demoniac. We don't know their names, but we know their what, church? Their issue. I want to remind everybody in this room of something this morning. You are not your issue. In fact, I want you to turn to the person. This is not a joke. I want you to turn to somebody next to you and tell them, you are not your issue. The reality is, listen, church, I don't think sometimes we realize how serious this is. The Bible says that God redeemed us from the pit. True? Do you have to live in your past? The Bible says we can be more than conquerors through Jesus Christ who strengthens us. So if you want to get healed, if you want to get unstuck, you got to quit hanging out with the mat dwellers. You've got to realize I've got to quit living with a victim mentality. There's a third reason why many of us are stuck to the mat, and it's this. Number 3, many of us are casting the blame upon others. Folks, do we not have a tendency to blame other people? But what's interesting to me, anyway, about our text here this morning, again, as simple as it may seem on the surface, Jesus says, hey, do you want to be healed? And what does this man, according to our text, immediately do? The reality is he starts blaming other people. I mean, think about it. If somebody had said to you, you've been on a mat for 38 years, do you want to be healed? As again, we'd expect the individual to say, absolutely yes. What do I need to do? Jesus, tell me what I need to do, because I'm all in. No, what does he do? He starts saying, well, nobody's here to help me get in the water. And guess what? Other people get in front of me, and they push me out of the way, and I'll put it to you a different way, church. It's always somebody else's fault. I was a sophomore at Heritage Christian University when the professor made a statement to me one day that has stood with me ever since. You see, I've had a tendency in my life to go, it's not my fault. You ever say that? And he said to me one day, he said, Jonathan, it may not be your fault, but it's still your responsibility. And that changed my thought process about a lot of things. Because I think a lot of us, we tend to go, it's not my fault. I even hear it today. I hear it in our lives, in our families, in our marriages, in so many places. Do you realize that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden? From then until today, Jonathan, I'd stop drinking if my wife would simply quit nagging me. You realize I've heard that from a fellow Christian. I'd be a better worker at my job But the truth is, Jonathan, nobody appreciates me. I wouldn't cheat on my spouse if my spouse would simply do this or that. Has that ever been said? You know what my favorite one is, though? Dad, I'd get better grades, but my teacher don't like me. Some of us have used that excuse. Listen, Jesus Christ came to this earth to heal us of our brokenness that every one of us have. And you may be tempted to sit there this morning about this blame game, and you may be tempted to say, Jonathan, you just don't get it. You don't know what I've been through. Okay? Apparently, you don't know what Jesus did for you. Listen, church, never make the hurt that someone else did to you greater than what Jesus has done for you. Think about it. Always make what Jesus has done for you greater than any of the hurt you'll ever receive in your life. If that's the way you'll stop and look at it, it will bless you in a way you've never imagined. Some of you may recognize the title of a book I read back in 2015. It's called Happiness is a Choice. You ever heard of that? And as I was reading that book years ago, there were two words that stood out to me that these psychiatrists said was the most debilitating words in the English language. You know what those two words are? I can't. But what these psychiatrists said was interesting to me. They said, in our field of work, we have begun to realize that I can't is simply an excuse. So we always encourage our patients, instead of using the phrase, I can't, just be honest and say, I won't. Because I can't is an excuse. I won't is a reality. And that is true. It's been true of my life. Folks, quit blaming others for what has you stuck to your mat this morning. We're out of time, but I just hope that you will think about what we saw on the screen, what we've read in God's Word, what we're seeing here, these principles, because the truth is, what has many of us stuck to our mat this morning again is we've gathered ourselves a bunch of people just like us, maybe as miserable as we are, and we don't want to move ourselves from that company because misery loves company. Or maybe we are too busy playing the victim game to really see what God has for you. Or quite simply, maybe you're like me. Isn't it always easier to blame somebody else for our mess ups than it is to own up to them? Maybe what's got me stuck to my mat this morning, maybe what's got you stuck to your mat this morning is that face that you look at in the mirror each day. But instead of seeing this in the mirror, see Jesus Christ. Hear his words that he spoke to this individual. And I'm going to ask you the same question as we sing this song of encouragement this morning. Do you want to be well? That takes on a lot of different meanings this morning for a lot of different people. But if in any way we can help you, we're going to sing this song. And if you need the prayers of this church, if you need to put on Christ in your life, if there is something that's got you stuck to the mat that I haven't even talked about this morning, and you want that to be removed from your life, let us help you with it as we stand and sing together.